Okay, all right. First year biology students, or also sometimes to our own credentialing people for technicians and stuff. And it's usually pest selective or animal selective. Bees, Hymenopterans, or Vesper wasp, or mice, or rodents, or anything sardines, squirrels, or so. So it's very selected to that. But that's not going to help you guys. And I didn't think that would be good for you to go ahead and do that. Besides, I'd put you to sleep. You would have all this data that you would be like, well, I'm never going to use this data. What do I want it for? Right. So what I tried to do was put together something for you guys that'll help you market yourselves. That'll give you some working knowledge of things that you're going to see out there that you have already probably seen out there. And that way you can speak with authority as to this is what's going on, this is what's happening, and then make the proper recommendations. I figured that would be the best way to take this thing and not just give you a bunch of useless stat and statistics that wasn't going to help you. Okay. All right. So we're going through here. Okay, so I entitled it Common Pest Related Findings in the Home Inspection Environment, right? And that's probably what it is the best title I could come up with, because that's kind of what you're going to see out there. You're going to find things and it'll be like, what the heck is it? But don't be distraught if you see something you don't understand, because I'm going to tell you what, I've been in 32 years and I've looked at things and gone, what the heck is that? Right? I have no idea, right? And then, of course, there is the ability to find those answers. And with me, you can contact me and I can find those answers for you. Okay. All right. As you see, Joe Stuart, entomologist, right? And like expert categories. What that means too is what the state is the state has certified me through rigorous testing that I am a qualified expert in those fields. And the different ones is 7 is for structural pests in there in homes and businesses. Insects, and then you have 7B, which is subterranean or wood destroying insects, including funguses and things, right? And then also you have D, which is vertebrate trapping and mammal management, right, to include birds, all right, and snakes and the fun stuff. And then also 8, and 8 is public safety, disease control, parasite, and vector control, which when we had COVID was very important, and the state used me a lot. Okay. All right. Okay, this is us, Raven Pest Control. Okay, and termites and rodents and bugs, oh my, okay. As you go up to a house, you're going to come up to a house, and very often when you go in there, your first thing you come across is the homeowner's been in there, the real estate agent's been in there, and they say, hey, I'm going to show you something. I want to show you right here, I've got these bugs, or I've got this, or is this termite? No, right? So right away, you're usually hit with these things when you walk in the door, because they really want to know what's going on. And they're going to look at you as the authority because you're the inspector. And they're going to believe that you understand what it is you're looking at. In most cases, you do, right? Okay. I love my little fella there. Okay. Okay. So what I tried to do today was I put together some objectives. And these are a couple of things that we're going to go over today to kind of help yourself. First off, how to protect yourself. A lot of times when I see home inspectors go into homes, I'll see them go into crawl spaces and attics, and they just go in like this, right? And a lot of times that's a really bad idea. And I'm going to explain why that's a bad idea and some of the things you could do to protect yourself, because that's important when you're in there. All right. The crawl spaces is a great place for pathogens. And the attics is not so much for pathogens. It's very dry and very airy usually, right? But it also has a lot of industrial fibers and a lot of industrial material up there that you can breathe and touch and come in contact with. And a lot of times what happens is it's hot and sweaty. Has anybody ever been to a place that's hot and sweaty when they're in there? Okay, yeah. Especially attics, they get up to 130, 140 degrees. And first thing you do is you wipe your forehead or you'll wipe your face. Well, one of the quickest ways pathogens can get to you is that way, right? They get to you by you just touching your face. And they say we touch our face up to 350 times in a day, okay? That's what I don't know who they are, but they say that, right? But by wiping sweat and all that. So you want to protect yourself, right? So we're going to go over PPE real quick, right? Common wood destroyers. There is a plethora of wood destroyers out there. And most of these you won't come in contact, but we're going to touch some of the ones such as brown rot or wet rot. We're going to talk about dry rot. We're going to talk about termites, right? And up in this area, we have eastern subterranean termites. Okay, we don't have the Formosans like down south. The eastern subterranean termite can take and eat a clothespin bag full of wood in a year. That's about a good average. So, and if you've seen in the past where wood is completely stripped all the way across, that means that's been going on for quite some time, right? And then also we're going to go over some of the beetles, powder post beetles, wood borer, old house borers, most of the different types of Bostrish beetles, they're called, okay? And we're going to go over carpenter bees, and of course, something that's not an insect, but a woodpecker. Now, woodpeckers that go after the carpenter bees and understand what they do and why it's happening, right? And things like that. Now, when it comes to wood destroying, a lot of times it can be a little confusing as to which one is carpenter ants and termite damage, which one is wood rot and termite damage or carpenter ants. We're going to go over that a little bit. Common rodents found in homes. Okay, now I'm not going to really go over the different types of rodents in Northern Virginia, all right? Because that's not going to help you, right? You're going to see mostly something called the house mouse, Mus musculus, right? And we're going to go in detail as to what he and she does, right? Inside a house, why they're there, what you will see as far as what they're doing. And we'll talk a little bit about the deer mouse, right? Not a lot. And then, but rats, Norway rats and all, you're not really going to run into the Norway rats in the house. If you do, call me, right? But if you're going to run into Norway rats, you might run into them in a crawl space, but mostly Norway rats are going to be outside. They're outside burrowing animals. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but I don't want to focus on that because that's not going to help you, right? We'll talk about the talent. You can tell in an attic, the difference between a squirrel running through the attic and a mouse running through the attic, or even a rat, right? How you can tell the difference in the insulation. There's certain things they do. We'll talk about ways that you can tell where the mouse is running at and why they're there by something called grease marks, right? That's an oil in their fur, okay? So we're gonna go a little bit in detail on that. Common insects found in home. This one here, I tried to keep it down as minimum as possible, because literally there's hundreds of insects you'll find in a home. A home is a habitat that we have for us, but for other animals, they don't understand that. For them, they're just trying to survive. So when you have ants coming into a home, such as odorous house ants, or carpenter ants coming in there, which can damage wood and is wood-destroying insects, are wood-destroying insects rather, coming in there, they don't understand they're in your home. They're not evil. They're not invading. They're just there because they're trying to survive, right? Things that you'll see such as pill bugs. Why are pill bugs around this door frame? What's the whole point of that? There's some significant reasons why they're there that will help you in your investigation to figure it out. Why are spiders in certain areas? Why did they get there? We were talking earlier about how other insects are attracted to UV light, and spiders pick up the pheromones of those insects, all right? And that's why a lot of times spiders are there. We're going to talk about some significant animals, such as the black widow, the brown recluse spider, right? And some ones that look scary, but aren't really that scary, such as the centipede, the house centipede stuff, right? And why it's there. And that'll give you a hint to look for other things. When you know some insects there because they're attracted to animals that are attracted to moisture, then you know there's a moisture problem. And then it's a matter of you detective working, going backwards and find out where it's at, okay? Occasional invaders found at home. These are things that just show up once in a while. They're not there all the time. They just all of a sudden pop up. Our infamous friend, the raccoon, squirrels, right, come on there. Snakes on occasion will come inside. It's not that they're there on a regular basis, but every once in a while you'll run into one, okay? And then this one here is the last part here. And this is better ways to say things and what to avoid. In my time in Northern Virginia, I think I had three cases where I had to actually be vetted by the courts and testify and go in and talk about them. One of them was with the home inspector, okay? And he meant well, but he didn't realize what he was saying would be interpreted by a plaintiff attorney, okay, right? So there is some things to avoid saying, and there are some things, and I'm going to give you some safe things to say that'll help you. And it's not like it's a bad thing to say, but try to avoid it, right? Okay. Oh, at any time during this, you got questions, please stop me and ask a question. I like to talk.
Please use the microphone.
Yes. Okay. I thought you were talking to me. Okay. Okay. All right. So PPE, personal protective equipment. Here are the things that we recommend that you do. Now, the gloves, latex and nitrate, I recommend if you're in a crawl space to use those. And the reason for that is that even though there's gravel on the ground or even the plastic, the urethane, the plastic urethane they have down there and stuff, right? There is material and pathogens and bacteria that builds up on those things and live on top of it. And when you're crawling around on your hands and knees down there and you're looking around, you're literally putting your hands into it and also your clothes, right, on these materials. A lot of times there's some pumps inside crawl spaces, and that's a water source, and the bacteria is just enormous around those things, and you don't realize it, right? And then you come out, and of course you do this, and now you wondering why you have an upset stomach, and something must have gave you food poisoning, and you know it wasn't the 7-Eleven sushi you bought that's 3 weeks old. But anyway, but that's basically what it is, right? Is the pathogens inside. Also for your eyes too, right? You want to make sure that you don't end up rubbing something into your eyes. Coveralls. Recommend that you use coveralls in a crawl space. Little tough in an attic because it gets really hot in the summertime, right? So you don't want to fall out up there because of heat exhaustion. The average temperature in an attic, because we actually did this, average temperature in an attic in Northern Virginia, we're counting Great Falls, Vienna, Fairfax, and those areas in there, Alexandria too, but not Old Town, right? The average temperature in an attic in July was 131 degrees. Whew. Okay. The temperature for death of an animal that exceeds an hour is 121 degrees. So that means that animals cannot survive in an attic for very long, and that includes us, right? So be careful when you're up in an attic and it gets that hot up there, right? Now, granted, some are better aerated and some had tree cover and everything, so it might be cooler. But remember, when you're up there and you start seeing sparkles, those are not stars, okay? Right? Come down out of there. It's getting too hot for you, right? Another thing too is if you see fecal material up there of various animals up there, and it's in an attic and it's over 100 and some odd degrees, that means the animal was there, doesn't mean the animal's living there, okay? And so remember, at night, the attic will cool down rapidly. So when it starts cooling down in an attic at certain night, animals will come up, right? So just to put that up. The N95 dust mask, and you also use the KN95 is also fine too. The reason that's important to use is breathing in not only pathogens, but if you're in an attic, the fiberglass and everything else. Be careful of that because there's a lot of stuff that gets moved around. You're crawling around in an attic, you're moving around, and you're kicking stuff up. When you kick it up, you're going to start breathing it. And when you start breathing it, and now there are certain things that animals have, such as the brown bat. The brown bat's guano can be dangerous. And the brown bat, if you breathe that in or contact and get it to there, you can get a fungal disease that causes you to have your lungs swell, your capillaries close, and you die. So if there's bats and guano, and the way you can tell the difference in guano and normal droppings is guano, it looks like it has silvery metallic in there, also has a white and black mixture, and on top of that, you'll find insect parts in it. Okay, do not handle guano with your hands or even gloves. Don't do it. There's people that specialize in removing that, hazmat teams that can do that. And of course, if you do see guano, look up. They give you a funny story on that from a cable guy. So if you give you a story on that, with a cable guy said, I told him there's bats up in an attic. I said, be careful, there's about 15 up there. And he goes, I ain't afraid of bats. Right? About 10 minutes later, he was screaming. The bats weren't afraid of the cable guy. So be careful, right? Wild animals do not understand that you're just up there doing your job. Wild animals are going to try to defend themselves, right? Okay. Eye protection, same deal. If you're in an attic or something like that, try to use goggles if you can, that are the eye goggles, like glasses that go on and stuff, just so you don't pick up the debris in your eyes. You'd be surprised, again, what's in a crawl space. Kick it up in there. All right. Anybody have any questions on PPE? No? Okay. Wood destroying organisms. There's a lot of different things with wood destroying organisms. I get called out about 80% of the times I get called out for things is because of the difference between wood rot, termites, and carpenter ant damage. Those are the three things that I get called out mostly about. And usually it's because and I'm saying home inspection wise, I'm saying a home inspector looks at it and he goes, that's possible termite, or that is termite, right? And the people don't believe it. Now, sometimes you're right, sometimes you're not, right? And it's very easy to distinguish between the ones if you've been doing it as long as I have, but it's not so easy to do if you haven't been doing it for 32 years, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between wood rot, termite damage, dry rot, right? And which one's the worst one out of wet rot and dry rot? Dry rot, exactly, dry rot. Dry rot will not go away. Dry rot will continue to grow even when the moisture count's down. You let it get wet again, it'll grow again. Brown rot or wet rot will stop. If you cut out that moisture, it will die. The big thing with brown rot, let's go to the next one here. Okay, the big thing with wet rot is that the moisture count. And I don't know if the fellow before me went over this or not, but I'm going to go over it again, right? The moisture count for wet rot is usually 50% in that range. And that's what feeds the brown rot into the wood. The brown rot actually consumes the cellulite in the wood and the grain of the wood going down the grain, right? It breaks it into chunks that look rectangular or also square. It can be large, small, it doesn't matter. But that's what happens when the fungus starts doing it. It shrinks the wood in and eats it. The wood breaks down, the excess components of the cellulite fall, and then you start getting the gaps in the wood and the cracks in there. Dry rot, right, will do the same thing. You see the same thing, much larger squares and everything than it is with the wet rot. But again, it also does the same thing, whereas the wood just begins to crumble. If you reach down and grab the wood and you touch it, it's crumbling. 99% of the time, that's either wet rot or dry rot. And if it's dry, that's dry rot. Right? Do you all carry moisture meters? Yep. Okay. Take that moisture meter out and stick those prongs right in there, and that little meter goes up or number goes up really high, you know you got wet rot. If it goes and it's like in that 20% range or in there, it's dry rot, right? Now, in both cases, with the dry rot, the only thing you can do is remove the wood. You have to get rid of the wood. There is no, I had somebody ask me, they say, well, what can you spray to fix this? Well, actually, there is a borate that I can use that will kill the fungus and suck into the wood, but it won't repair the damage. And the reason they got the wood dry rot or the wet rot is because the wood was exposed and there's a problem with moisture. So I can arrest it, but not for long. It'll come right back, right? And I had people say, well, won't wood regrow? Well, wood won't regrow. Wood's dead, right? So that's the thing is right? They have to replace the wood. Now, to what extent on that depends upon how far the damage is. But if you, and a lot of times you get guys get put in corners over this. Well, what do you mean it's substantial wood rot damage? So you're saying we have to replace the whole trim all the way around, right? Well, in that case right there, you say you need to replace the damaged area. That's it, right? At that point, put it in the carpenter's hands, right? Because they're going to try to tell you, well, can we cut off a 2-inch thing here? Well, you need to replace the damaged area. That's it, right? You need, and when it comes to wet rot, you need to seal off that area so it's no longer a water problem. A lot of times it's drains and gutters and the water is just pouring down from that. And when that happens, if they replace and fix the gutters, they fix the trim up there, they don't have the wood rot problem down by the window sills and everything else. And then people will say, well, can you paint over it? It's up to you. I'm just reporting you got wood rot, okay? And that it needs to be fixed, right? So with dry rot, every time they got to repair. All right, there is no fixing anything else to take the wood out. Okay, anybody got any questions on that?
So you're using these slang terms, wet rot and dry rot.
Mm-hmm.
And then you suggest that you can tell the difference between them with a moisture meter. Are you telling us that you can tell the genus and species by a moisture meter?
No, I'm telling you where the genus and species is most likely to be in, right? The Astrobacteria is the dry rot, and then the Bacterocrisia, if I'm saying it right, is the wet rot, okay? And those are the two fungus species, right? And the wet rot is the fungus species that's going to be mostly in super areas that are 50%. You won't find dry rot in above 20, 25%. That's what I'm saying. When it comes to the wet rot, you will find that species in there. There's actually about 10 different species that can get into moisture high content areas that are funguses of different types, but they're not part of a home inspection thing because they're mostly out in forestry and things like that, and trees out there, things that will affect trees and different things out there. So there's a lot of different funguses out there, but the ones that we come in contact with here is the wet rot and the dry rot. But if you take your moisture meter without taking a sample and taking it to a lab, you're not going to know exactly what is the species, right? But you can bet 99% of the time, if it's soaking wet and it's above 50%, it's brown rot. Okay. Now you can have white rot in there too if there's not a lot of UV light, and that's a variant of the brown rot fungi, right? And white rot has strips going through it of white rot. Have you seen that before, where it's the white strips going through? That's white rot going through there. And again, that's a high moisture count. Dry rot, hence the name dry rot, doesn't have a high moisture count. It's below 20%. So if you wanted to get super specific and you had the ability to send it to a lab, then you can certainly do it, right? But if you wanted to eyeball it and just call it wood rot, you certainly can too, okay? Right? Because they're both wood rot, right? I just wanted to let you guys have an idea so you can say, well, whether can we repair this? We're just going to paint over it. Right? It probably won't work if it's dry rot, right? 100% won't work, okay? And borates won't help it either, really. Did that answer the question there? Okay. All right. Now, let's move on to other animals. Termite and carpenter ant. This is the more difficult one to figure out, okay? Termites are subterranean animals that are blind. They feed in a spatric pattern. As they feed in that spatric pattern, they come around, they bring with them mud to make mud tubing, even into the ground. And when they go around, they take that mud with them and they hit up onto the wood. And then once they hit the wood, they go up in between the grain of the wood, right? They don't actually eat the grain of the wood. They skeletonize it, is what we call it. Right. So when they do that, they're eating the cellulitis, the softer material, the more starchy grain they leave. They'll penetrate it to get over to the other starchy material, but they won't eat the grain. Very often you'll see it skeletonized all the way up. One of the big indicators of termites is mud in between the grain, right? When you take a screwdriver and you hit it and you see mud falling down, that's termites every time. right? And termites, like I said, they'll eat a clothespin bag worth of wood in a year, but a lot of times they'll focus in one area, then they'll hit over here and they'll hit over here. They just don't hit one area and just move out. When pest control, we call that gradualization. That's where they just gradually continue to move, right? They don't do that. They're sporadic. They hit here, hit here, hit here, hit here. And they could hit several different areas, right? The treatment for termites is subterranean. You have to put something into the ground because they are a subterranean insect and kill them. And when you take out the colony, that's when you stop the damage. Now, the queen termite is about 60 feet underground approximately, and she can live up to 50 years. And she also has a male and sometimes more than one suitor there, and he does absolutely nothing. He's there for only the diversity of the species. And got a question?
How far underground?
It could be somewhere between 60 to 50 feet underground.
50 feet?
Yeah, termite colony. Oh yeah, they get down there deep. And they'll go ahead and she'll set up her colony, right? And when she does, she has a male, and all he does is for procreation and gets fed. It's a beautiful situation. If they had streaming and ESPN, it'd be great. I'd love to be a male termite. But all termites are female except for one or two, right? Okay. Now, termites will feed normally in 18 inches of the ground, right? 18 inches. That's their normal feed area, right? Now, they can go deeper and come down underneath the foundations and come up, but normally they don't. Normally they stay when they're in their foraging period in those 18 inches of soil. The way that a termite treatment is done is that there's two different ways. One is a bait system. The other one is a liquid system. Now, the bait system is very expensive and has a bit of a problem to it, is that when we put those stations in the ground, termites hit them, you know what, 100% of that colony will be destroyed within a year. It will take them down. The pseudofluxuron and nudifluxurons, that's the material in those stations, will kill that colony. However, odorous house ants, you know, you've seen those little ants that we have around here that are all over the place. People call them sugar ants and everything else, right? They're called odorous house ants because supposedly you squeeze them, they smell like rotten coconuts. I never smell it. But if they go into those stations, they leave a pheromone. And if they leave a pheromone, termites will never, ever go in that station because they pick that up. And we won't know there's an ant pheromone in that station. So you have a worthless station sitting there that termites will do this right around and go straight for the house. Bait stations are very expensive. The average home is about $1,200 to $1,500 to put them out. And to maintain them every year is about $200 to $300 to keep them up. A lot of people like them because they're very visual. You can see them. And on top of that, they think they're safer because the bait's in there. They're not much safer because the rain makes them leach anyway, right? But that's what people think. The other thing is the liquid treatment around the house. Now, how that's done is that 1 foot to the depth of the footer, no more than 4 gallons per every foot down to the footer. Like say you have a basement and the footer is 20 feet down or something, right? Okay, you can only put 4 gallons in there, which is 4 feet worth of material down, liquid, 1 foot all the way around the house. Going around. So that could be 200 to 300 gallons around a house. There's different materials that could be used, something called Thermador SC, something called a metaclopian can be used, right, which is frontline, and different materials. We use Thermador SC because that's the Mercedes-Benz of the pesticides. And the Thermador SC, the way it works is they go into it, they don't even know they're in it. And when they go into it and they're in it, they bring it back trophylactically. That means they basically butt the face, bring it back. That's how they feed. And within 1 week, it kills the colony and wipes it out. Now, you have to remember, too, a colony, like I said, is how deep it was, 50 feet. Think how big that colony is. And this is going to wipe out that entire colony in a week, right? So it's pretty good stuff. They're usually in an acre area up to 12 to 16 colonies in 1 acre area. So yeah, there's a lot of termites out there. If you've ever seen swarmers come up, has anybody ever seen swarmers come up? They come up in the hundreds of thousands. Only 2 or 3 pairs It's very romantic how that works, by the way, guys. They come out of this thing called a swarmer cast tube. And when they come out, there's a male and a female. They actually have eyes. They can see. They're not blind anymore, and they're hard shelled and they have wings because they morphed. She gave them a gel that made them morph to become the next colonies. And they come out in the hundreds of thousands, and they mate in the air at about 20 feet in the air and then drop down and everything eats them. There's only a couple pair that makes it. Some people say 10, 15 pair. And then they make it and they start and they eat their wings. And then you got your male and your female. It's the first queen and the first king, right? It go up. And then she starts going down deeper, deeper. She lays eggs, went deeper, deeper. She lays eggs, deeper, deeper. And then the termite thing continues, right? That's how termites work. So the material, the termidor hits them and takes it out because they don't even know they have it and wipes them out. Right. And termidor has a half-life. That's when it's half as strong as it was when you put it in the ground of about 25 years. Yeah, so it holds up. Right. Now, pest control companies won't give you more than a year's warranty because people love landscaping. They do landscaping and they end up removing the termidor a lot of times. And then they put in mulch. And we'll talk about mulch here in a minute in more detail. But people love mulch. And they pile it on top and they hire a company and they pile it on top and they hire a company. And after a while, you got this trampoline of mulch going all the way around. And the termites just go right over the termidor and get to the house. Same thing with carpenter ants and other ants too, right? So somebody had where they were talking about a pre-treat. Who was that with the pre-treat? I did. You did. A pre-treat is done on a building before they pour the slab, before they put the foundation in. That's where they cut the footprint in the ground, and then a company comes out and treats the soil, toxifies the soil with a termiticide, and then they put the foundation in, then they pour the slabs. That's required by the county. It's regulated by the county. It's required by the state. And I'm pretty sure it's that way in every state, maybe not California or New York, but in most states, that's required to do. There's a form that you get for that. And I'm pretty sure it's the 7A form, I think, right? I'll look it up, but 7A. And they have to have that form and the pest control company has it. If you do an inspection and somebody asks you, like you got asked, right? How can you prove that there was a termite thing when the house was built? That's the form you go back to look that the pest control company did, and the builder would have that, not you guys, not the homeowner. The builder would have that. Okay? Yes, sir.
I hate side questions, but I'm gonna ask one.
No, go for it.
Home shield.
Mm-hmm.
You see the little tubes inside the walls in
Yeah,
those
they
houses? That's BS.
They don't work. They don't work.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. Well, it was a novel idea. It was designed that you would have tubes going down into the ground so that termiticide, in this case, they were looking at them, I think, either phantom or imidacloprid, I'm not sure, right? And you notice the home shield doesn't do it anymore, right? But they would put the thing in there and pressure it down inside there. Well, the tubes would not hold up because the ground, there's a lot of clay in Virginia and everything else. And when they put that in there, it ended up spraying termiticide in the house, right? The tubes burst and suddenly the basement had imidacloprid all over the place. So given several lawsuits later, they don't do that anymore. They stopped. The big thing now is, oh, did you want me? Oh.
Yeah, he was talking about the perimeter system that goes in the wall, not the one that goes in the ground. It's
Yeah.
a green tube.
Yeah,
But
it's
it
a green
doesn't-
tube.
It doesn't go down in, it just goes around the perimeter.
Well, it goes into the ground and then it goes into the wall and then goes down and then goes around the perimeter. Right. But
I've only seen it running through the studs in the exterior walls. I've never seen it.
well,
run.
they've had it going through the perimeter down in the ground. They don't use it anymore. So there's some problems with it.
The current system.
Mhm.
The current system, which is very, very widely used by a lot of development builders around here, is called TAEX, TAEXX.
Right.
And that is micro delivery tubes, as Jim said, between the studs.
Right.
And it's at the perimeter of the house, all the way around. You usually find a port on the outside of the house where the pressure unit's plugged in to refresh it every 6 months or something.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Well-
widely used.
Well, here's the thing is that the Tilex system was a replacement for the home shield system, right? Because the home shield system failed and termiticide went into the house. Now, I don't know how effective that system is, right? I'm kind of like, right? Because we do post treatments, right? And I'm sure that if it works well, but we just lately, I just went out to a house that had that system and termites ate it up, right? So I don't know whether it's the material they're using or it didn't function properly. All I know was $3,000 later, we were happy. So, and, yes, sir.
So, you mentioned how the bait systems was
Mhm.
about $1,500 to put in, a couple $100 a year to maintain, things like this.
Right.
How much is the 25-year liquid system?
Normally on a house runs between $700 to $1,000 on a large house in Great Falls. That's the best example there. It depends on what you have to do. Sometimes we have to drill certain areas and drill through the slabs and different things in the garage and all. And then sometimes or lift pavers, and that can be a little expensive, right? But in those cases too, with the bait stations, that also gets higher in cost too. So, but I would say somewhere around $700 and some odd dollars to $1,000 is a good rule of thumb on that.
Two more aspects of that.
Mhm.
One, why would someone choose the bait stations over the liquid then? I mean, it sounds like the liquid is a better value.
Oh, well, a lot of people look at it as, and they get it sold to them as a green thing, right? That, well, it's a bait station, you can visually see it, it's there. It's like, you know, when you're selling the termiticide, it's actually into the ground, the liquid, but they don't see it. So it's in the ground. Is it working? Okay, I don't have termites, right? But with the bait stations, you see the bait stations every 12 feet going all the way around. And a lot of pest control companies try to sell that because you don't really need to have somebody that's certified to do that. You need to have somebody who can dig a hole and put the bait station in the ground, and that's it, right? So you don't have to have the technical expertise to do a liquid treatment on the outside if they're just digging a hole and putting it in there. And so a lot of that's put up like, oh, you want to keep your kids safe, put it in a bait station and we'll charge you an enormous amount of money. Right? Okay. And you make a mom worried about her kids, you can sell just about anything. So, but the liquid treatment is just as safe. It's in the 1 foot area. Okay. And other than going and spilling dirt up and eating it from the 1 foot area, you should be okay. Right. Same thing with Fluxeron. If you're around a bait station, you start eating the dirt around that, you're in trouble too. So you don't want to have that. But that's the main reasons, is that marketing.
And the last part of that I had with the question on it is, so that takes care of the termite. What about the carpenter ant? Is there something that does
That's
both?
a different animal. So we have to move to a different thing, right?
Okay.
Termites are termites, carpenter ants are carpenter ants. There is no one shoe fits all or one glove fits all or whatever you want to say, right? Okay, you have to have two different things. The reason is because carpenter ants, you see the smooth galleries in there, they don't actually eat wood, they dig it out. They tear into the wood and they want to colonize it. Now, carpenter ants have an Achilles heel. Carpenter ants cannot make a secondary colony, a primary colony in a home. They have to have the soil. The queen must have certain nutrients in the soil. Now, if there's a crawl space, they can do that for sure, but they have to have soil contact for the carpenter ants. So they'll come in and damage the heck out of the wood, leave a lot of times, and then come back the next year and come in there and continue what they're doing. It's a secondary colony is what it's called, right? And that's their Achilles heel. If you treat the exterior of a home like you would for ants, normal ants, odorous house ants, with a product like Taurus for Pimpernel or something like that, and you put it on the outside and the carpenter ants go through it, you wipe out the main colony, you'll stop the house problem, right? Because now they have to go back. Ants feed through what's called a trophylactic hub system, right? They have to have a puddle that the larvae actually chews up the food, spits it into a puddle, and they slurry it up out of that puddle. So you see ants a lot of times carrying, it look like little rice going around. Those are larvae that they're carrying. Those aren't eggs, that's larvae. And when they run around that larvae, they're doing these trophylactic feeding hubs, and they change in size. They could be as big as this table, they could be as small as a bottle cap, and they just keep moving like an octopus ride around. It's a predator defense, and they keep doing that. they can cut off any leg of it at any time if something goes wrong, right? So what happens is the ants go ahead and they spit the material in there, and you put this fipronil out there, they put it in there, they don't even know they got it. And when they do, it wipes out the larvae, it wipes out the ants, and it wipes out eventually the queen, right? Now, having said that, odorous house ants can have a colony a half-mile big. Huge colonies. They have multiple queens, call them princesses. So even though the smaller ants, the fipronil works on them well enough, right? It usually is not enough to wipe out the entire colony. It's just too big, right? Unless we're doing a whole neighborhood or something. Now, carpenter ants don't have that. They don't have the super colonies, as is called with odorous house ant. They have a singular colony, and from there, usually one queen, right? Monolithic. And then from there, the one queen goes ahead and she lays the eggs that they need to have the larvae to continue feeding, because that's the way the queen makes sure they don't take off and do their own thing. She keeps giving them larvae. They need that for their stomachs, basically. That's the larvae, to build that puddle so they can slur it up. And when they hatch and they eventually go back to the nursery and hatch, right, they have to get more larvae for their stomachs, to be their stomachs for the food. That's the way the ant world works, okay? So this material we put around on the outside will wipe out those carpenter ants relatively easy. A lot of companies will say, oh, it's going to be a huge amount of money for carpenter ants. No, that's a gimmick thing. It's as easy to kill odorous house ants, carpenter ants, as it is to kill odorous house ants. It's that simple. It's the same material, right? So it's not a big deal. Carpenter ants are actually easier to treat than a lot of people think they are, right? Okay, did I answer that on your question? Who had it? Okay, all right. So anybody got any question on termites or odorous house or carpenter ants before I go on?
Somewhere along the way, I think I heard about chemicals that they used to use, like chloridane, that can't be used anymore,
Yeah.
that they would last forever. Is that true? Does it last forever?
I don't know if it lasts forever. They say that it lasts for 150, 200 years, and at least, right? And it was put into the ground, and it worked so well that it killed most of the oysters in the bay, right? So it's banned. You can't have it anymore, right? But there are houses, like in Old Town, especially in different places, that are older homes. If a home is over 60 years old or more, it most likely has chloridane around it. That was a widely used material. And a lot of times that'll protect the home. Dursban was the replacement of that. And of course, that was banned, right? Because they proved it caused mental retardation in children, right? Yeah. And then now the newer products, the metaclopian and termidor, those are the ones that we use. The pyrethroids were tried for a while, but it didn't work. They were useless. Okay. All right. When it comes to the material that you have in the ground, a lot of times people say, well, my house has never been hammered. When you have Old Town places, and because how many people go to Old Town? Y'all go to Old Town? Okay. Old Town has wood that goes back hundreds of years. And they had this material called bitumen that was put into the wood, and it actually sucks into the wood. It's like a tarry thing. You can smell it, right? And people have asked me, well, why don't they use that now? Well, because 100 years ago, they didn't care about the smell of bitumen. Now they would care about the smell of bitumen, right? It smells almost like a gasoline type product, right? But that wood, termites will never hit it, ever, because it's sucked deep into the wood and it's locked in there. Okay. Anybody have any other questions on termites or carpenter ants?
Just a quick observation. To distinguish between termites and carpenter ants, termites, obviously, you'll see the mud tubes. That's what they travel in because they're going from inside the house. They don't stay there. They go back out again to the colony. But what you'll see when carpenter ants are in action is the frass. It's like sawdust.
Like
And
pepper.
That collection of sawdust is a dead ring. It's carpenter ants, right?
Right. It looks like ground up pepper. I was talking to somebody that said they saw that, right? Ground up pepper. It'll have insect parts into it. It looks like sawdust mixed with ground up pepper. And that is carpenter ant frass. And you see that, then odds are it's carpenter ants. And a lot of times you won't see the carpenter ants if it's out of season because they left. And now they're going to come back. Don't worry, they'll come back. Right? We love it. It works great for us. Okay, carpenter bees. The difference between a carpenter bee and a bumblebee is if you look at the abdomen, it's bright and shiny. A bumblebee is fuzzy. right? Bumblebees are much smaller, carpenter bees are much larger. Female has a dot on top of just over her head in the back, right? The male on the thorax, right? The male does not, right? The male does not sting, but the male will get up in your face because he thinks you want to have sex with the female. That's what it's all about. He wants to back you off. Get away from my girl, right? And if you look up here, you'll see all the different larvae going across there. That's how many larvae is in there. So when you see that hole going up, looks like a perfect drill hole. That's what's going on inside when they're putting their larvae inside, right? And of course, the carpenter bees does cause damage, as you can see when they opened up the gallery in there. But look what the woodpecker does. Woodpeckers are the devastating guys. They come up and they rip it open. And of course, whenever you start tearing into wood, what do you get next? Moisture problems, right? Now we're going to get the rots going in there and everything. So woodpeckers, how do woodpeckers know that they're getting, that there's larvae there? They hear it. Yes, exactly. They can pick that up. And a lot of people say, well, don't they make themselves deaf when they're pecking? Well, they can literally close their ears when they're pecking into the wood and then reopen them back up and close them up. And they have a shock absorber inside their head. Incredible animals. Right? So, and they can hear that larvae in, or they can hear the vibrations of them moving around, right? Woodpeckers will also go after carpenter ants. It's very common for that. You'll see them on siding. You'll see siding going up like this, and they'll say, well, I didn't have any carpenter bees there, but look at it stripped going all the way up. Well, they were after carpenter ants, is what they were after. Occasionally, they'll go after box elder bugs, but that's not really their taste, right? Crows will take box elder bugs and tear the shingles off your roof to get to those. Cedar shake shingles, yeah, crows will tear them up, okay? So this is the carpenter bee. The problem with carpenter bees is they leave an aggregation pheromone. And the aggregation pheromone is a pheromone they put out that says, I'm calling you. And they want to have every carpenter bee that can find it come over here, especially females. And every year you'll get carpenter bees back there, even if we kill that carpenter bee and we kill that larvae inside there, which we can, right? And kill them all off, right? Next year, there'll be a new female there because the aggregation pheromone. They have to take and seal that hole off. They have to either treat the wood or pressure treat it or something to get that aggregation pheromone off, or stain it and paint it, one or the other. I always recommend people replace the wood and then make sure you get it proper wood, either pressure treated or stained or painted. Okay? Anybody have any questions on carpenter bees? Yes, sir.
The pressure treated wood is still vulnerable?
Can be. It depends on the, I've seen it where they'll start to dig into it and then they'll stop, right? Because it's just too difficult for them, or the material inside repels them off. But I have seen them actually go into pressure treated wood before and set up just fine. So it depends. And also how well it's pressure treated. Sometimes people say, oh, this wood's pressure treated and it's been sitting for 12 years or something, you know, we don't know how that is.
But the paint is effective in deterring the attack initially?
Right. The paint will cover the aggregation pheromone. You cover the pheromone with the paint, you won't have any problem. Anybody else any questions? Okay. All right. You got a lot more questions than I thought on this stuff here. Okay. The house mouse. Okay. Let's see. How much time do I have here? How much time do we have left?
We're going to 3.
Okay, good. I'm good then. We got plenty of time. Okay, the house mouse. Okay, Mus musculus, my buddy, or actually the female is the main boss. Here's how Mus musculus world works. Okay, they live naturally out in the field. The female is more dominant than the male, but it's a hierarchy like, hey guys, come with me. Kind of like me at the University of Maryland, we follow the girls to the club, right? That's how it is, right? And the female mouse, she's larger in the house mouse than the males, right? She'll take with her 2 subordinate males or a subdominant female. Usually it's 3 to 4, sometimes it can be up to 5 or 6, right? And for whatever reason, they decide there's not enough food here. I don't like it here. Come with me. And they'll go off and they'll come up to a structure. And the first thing she does is urinate on the outside of the structure, leaving a little trail out there saying, come on, boys, it's a keger. She wants to have more diversity. The more diverse the species, the stronger the species, right? So once they get up there and she's doing that, right, Well, they don't have mousemingle.com. That's the only way they can do it, right? So she marks on the outside. She sends the males inside. She says, go inside, dummy, look around, right? So the males will come inside. Now, again, they don't have mousemingle.com. So the males, and they don't have signposts or there's no smartphones or anything. So mouse has only one way to communicate with other mice, and it's through droppings, right? So you'll see in a house, droppings in a corner by a garage, droppings in a kitchen, or droppings downstairs, and it's a good amount. You'll say maybe 10, 20, 30 droppings. A mouse doesn't randomly drop its droppings. It drops them as calling cards. Meet me here, procreation, I found a food source. Inside the wall, they'll say, follow me this way, go over here. In an attic, this is a room we can procreate in. Nobody's ever up here, right? It's quiet. And that's how they leave their droppings doing that. So it's very common for you to find droppings in an attic. I would say any house that's over 5 years old, there's a 90% chance that you're going to find droppings in an attic from mice because they visit. Now, does that mean that the mice have decided to live in that house? No. A lot of times attrition through disease, or just the female says, I don't like it. And she moves on, right? Can happen. And sometimes the female gets killed for whatever reason. A predator gets her or something like that, and the males just move on. So you may have droppings, but no mouse population in a house. And we find that quite often, right? Now, inside the walls, mice have this oil in their fur called sebum that has hormones in it, and they are thigmotactic, which means they like to have two sides touching them. Of course, a mouse can run to the middle of the floor, but when they have the two sides touching them at one time, they rub against that wall. And you like how a cat rubs its face? Mouse does that too and leaves that oil on the wall, and that's called a grease mark. And what that does is that when Molly or Tommy comes behind her and hits that, the follicles on the side of the paw and the side of the muzzle come up and say, Bobby went this way, Susan went that way, in total pitch black. They won't see anything, and they have what they call maze memory. They can go through, and they'll go into the walls. Now, a lot of things right now is people say, oh my God, there's droppings in your attic, tear out all your insulation, my disease, and oh my God, and everything else. Well, if there's droppings in your attic, there's droppings in your wall. You're gonna tear your walls out? Okay, no, you're not gonna tear your walls out, right? So what is the condition of danger on a mouse that's a house mouse when it comes to disease and danger? Right? Well, no significant disease has ever been linked to humans from house mouse, moose muscus droppings, ever. I wouldn't recommend eating them, okay, right? And there are diseases that these mice have, and all fecal materia, including us, have diseases in it, right? And of course, the mouse, remember, they leave those as calling cards, right? So they're designed to hold up, right? And they're shelled on the outside. A mouse doesn't require a water source, whereas a rat does every day. A mouse can get water a lot of times out of its food, a lot of times out of the air even, right, mice? So, but they'll take it if they can get it, like condensation in lines and all, right? But they don't need water, and their droppings are rather dry, right? They don't have a moist dropping on purpose, so bacteria doesn't eat those up. They're actually bacteria resistant because of that. So when you have droppings, the darker the droppings, the newer the droppings, right? And people ask me all the time, well, can you tell how old those are? I said, well, let's see if they're chewy. And then you don't know, right? Okay. A lot of times you can't tell the age on the droppings, right? But there's no significant problem. The one problem you do have with mice, you see our little fella there chewing on the wires, right? They will do that. They'll chew on the wires because their incisors continue to grow. And if they don't chew down those incisors, and that's why a lot of people say, oh, I hear scratching and chewing in the walls. That's what the mouse is doing. They're chewing down their incisors. Males will do it more than females because they are, it's kind of like us with peeling the beer label, the label of the beer bottle, right? It's because they're anxious because they haven't mated yet. Right? And they're chewing on the inside of the walls to bring their incisors down, right? Okay. But females will do that too when they're making nesting areas, right? Attics, a lot of time get blamed for house mice, but that's just a room we don't go in. And remember the temperature range on that, going up to an average of 141? That is not a hospitable place. Your walls are nice and cool and cozy. Disney got it right. That's where Fible is. Okay? He's in your walls, right? And that's what it is. So even though the attic is placed, now a lot of times you'll see these up in attics, or you'll see them in basements and all. And I've had home inspectors before say, rodent infestation, stations are present. That's not true. A station just means there was rodent control put out. That's it. Now, there may have been a mouse there. Yeah, could have been, right? How old's that station? How long has it been there? Is there still a mouse problem, right? Just because there's if anything, the station is a proactive measure. It's the other way around. You are taking care of a rodent problem, right? It's when you see like a mouse run over your shoe. Now you got a problem, right? Then there's mice there.
What does that station do?
Okay, well, this is the second generation antiqueg station. Inside here is an anticoagulant comes in there, and this is not your Home Depot stuff, not your Tomcat. This is something called bromodevilon, right? And when they eat this, they go to sleep and they don't wake up. Now, what usually happens is the mouse eats it, it thins the blood of the mouse, causing the hemoglobin not to be able to hold oxygen anymore, and they asphyxiate. Their brain doesn't have enough oxygen, and again, they go to sleep and they don't wake up. But 90% of the time, they do leave the home. Even in the wintertime, they'll leave the home because just like us, if you can't breathe, you want to get a breath of fresh air, they're trying to breathe, right? And they feel light-winded and everything else, right? And they're trying to get away and figure it out, right? But every once in a while, they don't make it, right? And that's when you end up having one. And if a female is pregnant and she dies in there, that's when you get your stinkers, right? And that usually lasts for about 2 or 3 days. And you'll see a dried up, shriveled up mouse off in a corner somewhere. Okay, but these are antiqueg stations. Outside, you have a big one. And that's designed for the female mice. Remember, she's going in and out, in and out. She's constantly going in and out all the time. She lets the male stay inside. And when she dies, there's consequences, right? What was that, Ice Age, where they had the Daquando dodos and the female fell off the cliff and they said, well, it's our last female. There's going to be consequences on that one. Well, that's how it is with mice too. There's going to be consequences, right? Female's dead. Males don't know what to do. They go outside, they hit the big station outside, or they also go somewhere else and look for the female. People say, well, can you rodent-proof a house? No. A mouse only needs about the size of your fingernail and your pinky finger to get inside. That's a full-grown female mouse. I had to, here's one of the testifying things. I had to testify in support of code enforcement in Old Town Alexandria. A restaurant caught on fire because a mouse got stuck in one half of a plug-in, and their body was halfway in there and started a fire, right? And the arson investigator said, mouse caused fire, right? And he was right, right? Of course, the insurance company goes, no, Monty, a mouse couldn't have done that. This is arson, right? So I had to go in and say, no, a mouse can do that. A mouse absolutely can do that. I had to show examples. We actually took a mouse and showed them squeezing through things. Right? And you would be surprised what a mouse can do. The reason for that is the bones are very pliable. Their spine is in the center of their skull, not like the base like us. They can concave their bones. They can literally pull their organs and snap them forward to propel them through things. If we displace our heart more than 4 inches, what happens to us? We die. That's why we have a static rib cage, right? But a mouse can take its whole organs and shoot it into its body and push it through things. Pretty cool. I think it's amazing. And also, the house mouse is the only other mammal on all 7 continents. They went down with the Swedes to their weather base by accident. So they're on all 7 continents, and us. We're the only other mammals. Okay? Deer mice. Here's the difference between a deer mice that carries hantavirus. And these guys you got to be careful with, right? It's deer mice. This one doesn't show the good picture of that, but deer mice are usually larger. House mouse female is about this big. Deer mice are a little bit larger, right? The deer mouse has a brown outer fur on the outside of it and a white underbelly. And the white underbelly goes halfway up on the mouse, right? The droppings are much larger in quantity. Now you'll see small droppings with house mouse and then larger droppings, right? But here's the biggest thing with the deer mouse, why you don't have to worry too much about it is they don't really like us. They'll go into our cottages when we're like summer homes or whatever we got. And then when we come in, they vacate, but they like to drop their droppings everywhere. And people start to sweep them up. And when they do, they kick up that dust. And that's where the hantavirus gets in our respiratory system, right? So by spraying, and I recommend this with any droppings, spray it down with a mixture of a disinfectant, let it sit for a minute, and then clean it up. And that's in all cases on any droppings. It's droppings, right? So, but with deer mouse, you definitely have to do that because they have the hantavirus, right? You won't see, I think I've seen 2 deer mice out by Vienna Great Falls in 32 years, right? But if you go farther out towards Winchester, you'll see a lot more in like these hunting shacks and things, where they're at. But as soon as we move in, they get out. They don't like us. I don't know why they don't like us, but they don't like us. Okay. Any questions about the house mouse? All right. Okay. And you're going to see that now. We're going to talk more about using the word infestation for the house mouse, but we'll talk about that down the road here. Okay. Scaradanes.
Yes, I have a question.
Squirrels. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a question? Thought I heard somebody say something. Oh, okay.
Mice that eat these this bait in the bait stations.
Mhm.
Do the contaminated carcasses provide? Will it kill birds or other mammals that eat the carcass?
No, there's no secondary poison. Well, I'm talking about the ones that we use in pest control. I don't know about any other materials that somebody else might use, but the ones that we have in pest control, immediately when a mouse eats the material, it dissolves into its system very quickly in its stomach. We call it the pop rock effect, right? Okay. And goes into their system very quickly. And when it does, it's now the ingredient that's broken into its components. So say that a mouse eats the bait, steps out, and a hawk hits it, right? Well, the hawk's going to be okay. There's no secondary poisoning. Now, say that the mouse is in there chewing away and a snake eats it while it's chewing away. Yeah, there's a slim chance that the snake might still get the rodenticide because the mouse never got to swallow it, right? He's still chewing away on it, right? But usually not. Same thing with an owl. It would have to, like, immediately as the mouse took one step out of the station, hit it, right? But another thing too, the droppings, a lot of times you'll see are green colored. And you'll say, well, okay, the mouse got into the bait. Well, that's a dye. That's all it is. That just tells us the mouse took the bait. And sometimes you'll see dark droppings around a bait station too that aren't green. Well, that just means the mouse marked it, then ate the bait, instead of like ate the bait, then marked it, right? But remember, they use the droppings as calling cards, so they'll mark that bait when it's there. So it's common to see around a bait station a whole bunch of droppings. Did that answer your question?
Is it still true with the other stuff like you get at Home Depot and Lowe's?
I think Tomcat, it is true, right? But there are some materials you have to be careful of that you can get, like in old farming areas and stuff that, the people put out that can cause secondary poisonings. Just make sure you read the label on it, right? And be careful. I mean, I can only speak for the pest control industry. I can't speak what somebody gets at, like, there used to be Southern States. You remember those places they used to have? And they used to have a material, it was a corn feeding meal that had something in it, and then they took it away from them. So just make sure you read the label. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, no problem. Scaradanes, squirrels. Okay, squirrels, cute little fellas, love nuts, can do a horrendous amount of damage on a home, right? Why do squirrels go into houses? Right, but why? I mean, they live in trees normally. Why would they do that? Because something happened to their primary home. A storm, rain, something, tree fell, and they need to have a backup place to live. That's it. And then once they move into a place, they may stick around because they're like, you know what? We've been missing out on something here, right? Now, as you can see the damage here, but a lot of times squirrels get into attics and places like that. You can't even hardly see how they got in. They pushed the shingles up and got in and slid their way through. Now, in an attic, here's how you can tell if it's a squirrel in an attic or a mouse or a rat in an attic in the insulation. Now, I'm talking about either blown insulation or fluff insulation, right? If it's got holes in the insulation that are complete holes, and there's gray marks around that holes, or even not gray marks, but holes, that's a mouse or a rat that's in there. If it's a trough going through the insulation, that's a squirrel. Now, the reason for that is that squirrels do not like to be covered by something. They won't do it. I mean, I've seen squirrely climb up a rain spout, which is, they'll do that. But in most cases, when it comes to that, they don't make tunnels in insulation. They run across the top and make a trough in there. Whereas mice make tunnels through the insulation to get across. Okay. The way with squirrels is the best way to stop a squirrel is to go ahead and in the daytime when it's sunny outside, seal it off with a one-way door. And what that is the squirrel goes out and can't get back in. It's like a piece of mesh. Squirrel goes out, flaps down, they can't get back in, right? And then the squirrel goes, well, I guess I gotta go make one in a tree now, right? And they'll go make one in a tree, right? But that's how you do it with a squirrel, is to get them out. Be careful in January through March doing that, is because the females have pups. And when the females have pups, and she is a great mother, she will tear the shingles off that roof to get back to her pups, right? So the best way to do that is, and I know it's hard for a homeowner, is just to let her pups get out. So they're outside with her, and you'll see their little tiny squirrels out there running with mom. And then around April, do the one-way door and block them off, right? I know a lot of people say, oh my God, what if they're up there and they're gonna be urinating, all that? Well, yeah, they've been up there, okay? Right? That's the best way to do it. If not, you're gonna end up having more damage. Or we could go up there and take the squirrel pups out and take her out and they all die. And a lot of people don't wanna do that either, right? And we're not into it either. We don't like to hurt an animal unless we have to, right? That's one thing you find in pest control. Pest control companies don't want to sacrifice an animal just because we can. We want to do it when we have to. We want to try to exclude them before kill them. Manage the environment before we have to eliminate them with any chemicals or other treatments. That's what we want to do. That's a good pest control management company. Okay, anybody got any questions on our friend the squirrel here? Now, if you see acorns in an attic, obviously that's a squirrel. Will a rat do that? Not really. I mean, they can, but not really. And you'll see the straw material on the inside.
Question.
Yes.
Is there any reason to think that new houses that are built today seem to have more potential egress openings for rodents than older houses that were better built?
Depends on the house, I guess, and the variance of that. There's a lot of remodeling that was done on older homes that can open up unusual avenues for animals. But overall, you're right. The older homes were built better. The newer homes are more prefab, and they have a lot like, jigsaw puzzle put together pieces, especially when it comes to like squirrels too, because a lot of times the shingles, they'll say, well, that'll stop the rain, but they forget about the squirrel climbing up the side and going inside in between the shingles, right? And things like that. So it depends on the home. But overall, older homes were better built. They just were, right? When it comes to rodents, there's a greater chance of more rodents being there because remember the urine trails on the outside? There's a much better chance there'll be urine trails for a long time there and a lot more fecal material around because of the years and years. My house was built in 1960. I went up in the attic and I did a dropping count. I know it sounds like fun to you guys, doesn't it? So I did an actual dropping count, right? And that showed me that I'd had probably, based upon statistical analysis and everything, I had probably somewhere between 200 to 300 mice since 1960 visit that house, right? And actually that sounds like a lot, but that's not. Think about it. We're talking, 60 years? 70 years, right? And break that into 200 and some odd mice, that's not too bad considering, right? That visited that house.
One follow-up thought.
Mhm.
With vinyl siding and all, the
Mhm.
vinyl cornices that are used seem to be pretty decent pathways for rodents. I've even heard stories of snakes being able to to navigate up through those. Is that really possible?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, you see a lot of snakes. Mostly the snakes that go up inside where the siding is something called the DK brown snake. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a brown snake and it's an adult about this big. They're harmless. They're constrictors, right? But they like to get up in between that siding like that. For them, it's very comfortable to get up inside there. Now, mice will readily go up inside siding and get there if they have to. I've seen people say, oh, I want to seal up my garage. Well, that's fine, but your siding's got a gap this big going all the way around the house. And the mouse is like, okay, and goes around the corner and goes up inside. You got to eliminate the population. You cannot seal a mouse out. Now, as far as black snakes go, they usually like to have about a good 2 or 3, 4 inches to get up inside. And they don't like going up unless they're picking up. Black snakes pick up the scent of mice. So if you got mice going up in your your siding, you're going to have black snakes going up inside your siding, right? Same thing in the basement, right? And we'll talk a little bit about snakes here in a minute, real quick. But snakes are there because of the conditions that keep them fed and happy. That's what it is. Okay. Anybody got anything else on squirrels? Okay, good. Okay, my boy. I had to pick one up this morning at Homeland Security. So anyway, little guy got in there. It was crazy, right? Okay, raccoons, right? Normally 99% of the time a raccoon gets into an attic, and it's usually an attic, but it can be a crawl too, is because it's a female and she's looking for a safe place to have her pups, right? She does not normally want to stay up there because of that temperature difference that gets up there, but she will from January to sometime around March right now, right? April, right? Up there, she'll have 7 to 9 pups, and she's a great mother. She will attack you if you get up there too close to her. There are some means to get them out. Something called eviction is a smell deterrent that can be put on a tennis ball in a box and put up in the attic. And the female picks up that smell and she will pick her pups up and leave. 100% of the time, she will leave. It works really, really well. Or you can call in a trapping company and they'll charge you $1,000 for taking the raccoon out. Okay. And the bottle of eviction costs about $47. Okay. Right. All right. As you can see, they don't care where they go to the bathroom. Okay. And they don't care that you know they're there, right? Raccoons, they're not very clandestine. They'll come up there and they'll rip it apart and they'll say, excuse me, I'm going to have babies. I'm going to be up here, right? And they have just the time of their life up there, jumping around, tearing cables, knocking your direct TV off. They just have a ball, right? So that's the raccoon. Now, people are always afraid of raccoons having rabies, right? Man, a raccoon can have rabies, just like a fox can have rabies, right? But it's like 1 in 5,000 that'll get rabies. You don't have a lot of raccoons running around Northern Virginia. It just doesn't happen, right? She's up there for the reason she wants to have her babies, and then she's going to move on eventually, right? But if you want to hurry things up, use the eviction, get her out of there, and then seal it up. People are worried about disease. Well, any animal, including humans, that defecate can build up bacteria and diseases and all, but in an attic, again, is very arid dry. So when it dries up, even urine stains, it dries up there, you won't have a huge amount of bacteria or viruses or anything else up there. Crawl space, a little bit different, but in an attic, you have less risk of a disease than you would in your living room, right? Something like that, or even outside. Okay, so it's a lot drier, hotter, arid up there. Okay, anybody got any questions on Rocky Raccoon? All right, there we go. Now let's go over snakes real quick because I didn't put a slide in here about snakes, but I see people are interested in snakes. Okay, the primary snakes you're going to see in Northern Virginia is the black rat snake. You're going to see the juvenile rat snake, which is yellow and black, an alternative. And the juvenile rat snake, the black rat snake is pretty docile. They don't want to bother you. In fact, they're big babies. If you go over and pick one up, right, a lot of times it'll act like it's dead and go stiff, and then you hold on to it, it'll start crying. It thinks you're going to eat it, right? They are big babies. They are constrictors. They do have ridged teeth in their mouth, and they can bite you, so they're a wild animal. Don't forget that, right? But they're pretty docile, the adult black snake, right, rat snake. You can take it and move it over and just get it out of the way. right? And it'll take off. The juvenile rat snake has yellow and black, and it's like square, yellow, black, yellow, black, yellow, black, square going down. It has like ridges on both sides. They act extremely aggressive. They'll jump at you and they're like, I'm going to get you. Well, it's all an act. Okay. They're constrictors. They don't have fangs, but they're going to coil up and they're going to hammer at you and everything else. And that's just something that's built into them to defend themselves, right? Those are juvenile rat snakes. You ever have a question if it's a juvenile rat snake or a copperhead, right? Remember, the copperhead has the stop sign like pattern that has the in between and is brown and it has like an orangish outline going all the way down. But even still, if you're like, I can't really see, is that a king snake? What the heck is that? Right? There's the Virginia Hepatological Society. You go and Google and type in their Virginia snakes and it'll come up. It's their society and they have a fantastic site that tells you everything about the snake, what their behavior, are they poisonous or not, right? And all you got to do is to put in there Virginia snakes, and it'll come right up there, and you'll see it, right? Also, there's also a lot of lizards out here. We have something called the broadhead lizard. It's this big and it's brown colored, and they're actually pretty cool. If you get them to get used to you, they're like a dog. They'll come over and sit next to you. They're cool little lizards, and they'll eat even small mice and stuff like that, and they're harmless. They do no harm at all, right? And they don't even have teeth. They just have ridges inside. That's all. DK brown snake, we talked about that, harmless as adult. People will say, I got baby snakes in my house. It has a ring around its neck. That's actually an adult. It's called a ring-necked snake, right? Brown snakes about this big, again, adults. Slug snakes. Go to that site, look at the snake, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. A lot of people freak out over snakes, but most of them here in Virginia is harmless. Baby copperheads. How can you tell a baby copperhead is? It has a yellow or green tip on the end of its tail. If it has that yellow or green tip, do not touch it. If it bites you, it will release all of its venom in one shot, right? Extremely dangerous, right? But they have a green and yellow tip at the end of their tail, right? When you're going in, you're looking in crawl spaces and you're digging through insulation, right? Careful. I use a back scratcher, right? Because I have many times moved insulation and a copperhead hits the back scratcher. Okay, it would have been my hand. Especially like you reach around siding, as you said, you're feeling underneath the feel there, and all of a sudden you get this pinprick on your hand. It was not a love kiss. Okay, right? So you just kind of look up with a flashlight. Be careful when you're out there doing that, right? Yeah, I use a back scratcher. I got this one that's like an expanding thing, and I can kind of like pull back the insulation and I can see it. Because I'm old, I can't react that fast. I used to when I was in the Army, but I can't do it anymore. So, all right. So that's raccoons, that's snakes. Anybody have any questions on those two? All right, well, we're flying right along here, okay? All right. Okay, now before we go into safe wording, let's talk a little bit about insects that you could see and the reasons why, okay? You may end up seeing things such as pill bugs or centipedes. Centipedes are spider hunters, and they are hunters of other insects. If you see house centipedes in there, that means there's other insects. And you have to ask the question, why are they there? Not that it's there, but why are they there? Usually 90% of the time when you have a centipede in there, there's a moisture problem. Why? Because they're after the spiders that are after the flies and other insects, right? So you got somewhere a moisture problem. Same thing with little roly-poly bugs, sow bugs, right? And by the way, you know they're related closer to crustaceans than they are insects. I just want to point that out. So when you eat shrimp, think about them. So they take heavy metals out of soil. They break down soil and carry up nutrients and all. That a lot of times when you see them around a door frame and all, that means there's a moisture problem. There's a buildup of organic material there somewhere. Now it could be that the people who are homeowners are putting out compost. And compost, so they got beautiful flowers, right? Well, the compost is being eaten by these things, right? It's the same reason for ants. Compost is nothing more than organic matter that's breaking down. That's all, okay? All right, let's talk about this, okay? Safe words and not safe words. Okay. Infestation. This get more people in trouble than any other word. Okay. We know that in common talk and common use of language, we'll say, oh my God, it's infested. I look at my son, I say, your brain's infested with nonsense. Well, you know, but we use the word infested a lot, right? But infestation in the pest control and home environment, when it comes to home sales and all, really gets real estate agents and homeowners up on end, right? To give you this example of the one time that I had to go, it was a home inspection. I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago. I have to go back and look. He said, looking in an attic, right, there is an obvious infestation of mice. The home, the home was a $3.2 million home, right? And the buyer walked away. They said, I will not be in a home that's infested with mice. I will look somewhere else. The seller and the real estate agent had immediately right there livestock right there on the floor, right? I mean, they just gave birth to livestock. I mean, it was total lost their minds, right? And I don't know all of that because I wasn't involved in the beginning of it, right? All I know is I got a phone call, it says, we need you to look in an attic. You're an expert, you're vetted by the courts. We need to know, is there an infestation of mice in that attic? Well, I go up there, right? And I go through and I run about an hour and something going through and I'm doing sample counts and everything else. And I come back and say, no, there is no infestation of mice. There are some droppings up there. It's called an entry. That's what it's called. It's normal. And I have everything I was telling you guys before, and this is normal, but there's no infestation. What does the court deem as an infestation? Because believe you me, they have gone at great lengths to come up with what that word means because of restaurants that were shut down and things like that, bed bug situations, right? Hotels. An infestation is an out of control, and that's the big word, out of control animal population that unchecked is causing danger to people, endangering people, or also causing a disease problem. That is an infestation by the court, right? Rarely will that ever apply to anything. Now, granted, a restaurant, that can apply. You got cockroaches. I went to a restaurant. Yeah, I want to know where to eat. I can tell you where not to eat. But anyway, I went into a restaurant. I picked up plates and roaches were running around the plates in a restaurant, right? I've seen it where chicken heads were floating in the sink and maggots were all in it, right? This is infestations of things that are health related, that are problems. But in a home, you're not really going to see an infestation of something, right? That's out of control, animals. So stay away from that word completely. Just don't ever use it in a report, okay? I mean, you can say it to your kids like I did, but don't ever use it in there. Disease causing, that's another one. Don't ever use that one because unless you have a degree like I do in biology and you can say for 100% that as like I'm category 8, and I'm in public safety when it comes to disease control, yes, that is disease controlling. The disease problem right there because of that, because of pathogens, because of water, blah, 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 right? You're going to get eaten alive. Because they will, right? Just don't even say it. There's no need to say it, right? Just say, have someone look at it, okay? Loose animals. I've run into this one too. Loose animals running through the walls in the home, okay? That's a bad idea to even say that. Don't say that, okay? Dangerous, okay? Don't use the word dangerous. And the one with dangerous that I saw is that wood rot has caused a dangerous situation. Well, it was on the window edge. And they said, well, if the window falls out, it's dangerous. No, that's not dangerous, right? And it gives the wrong impression. If you end up costing, nobody cares what you say until it costs money, right? That's when people care. And real estate agents are rarely your friend. They like you. But if it costs them money, right, they're going to start to scrutinize everything you say, right? And they're going to and they'll quietly have people like me come in and say, is that real? and I don't know. I don't know I'm going against you. I'm just telling what I see, right? Because that's my expertise, right? Things to use instead. Possible activity. That's a good one, right? Possible activity covers everything, right? Well, there's possible mouse activity. There you go. That's the end of that. At that point, let somebody like me, and if I turn around and say it's infestation, I can go into court and I can hammer that, right? Presence. There's a mouse presence. Yeah, there's a heavy insect presence. You could say that presence, right? Heavy insect presence in the crawl space, right? That's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Observed, right? I have observed droppings. There you go. Doesn't say how many, doesn't say what it is. I've observed them. At that point, drop 10, punt. It's on you guys. Okay. Needs evaluated. Okay. When you say needs evaluated, you've again dropped 10 and punt. You've taken yourself out of that realm of things that you could be hammered for. Highly recommend the ones on the right. Say totally stay away from the ones on the left. Okay. So I know you got a plethora of questions about this. Anybody got any questions about what to say or what not to say? Nobody? Wow. I figured that would be a hot topic here. Okay.
Self-preservation, we've learned a lot of those tactics over the years. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I have learned that, you know, you want to, we do it all the time with homeowners ourselves or even businesses. We've learned to gauge ourselves defensively going into places. So we use our words very careful when we say something. We had a restaurant owner that took offense that we said his restaurant was infested. And he threatened us with defamation. And I said, go for it, baby. The countersuit will make it. I'll have a Bahama vacation. Come on, go for it, right? Because we take pictures, right? And it's pretty obvious it was infested, right? So, but see, that's things that we can do, right? But in your realm, you could probably do the same thing for things that you do and stuff, right? But when it comes to pests and everything, don't use those words. Use these words, okay?
So I would say that the observation suggests the presence of possible activity and therefore needs evaluation.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, any of those are fine. If you use that way, that's quite okay. As long as you're saying you need to look more into this, right? Try not to define what it is, right? Because if you define and you say, oh man, you got a cockroach infestation. Now you can say, I observe bed bugs. At that point, anybody can take anything you want, and then it's up to me to say how bad those bed bugs were. Somebody said something to me about bed bug feces, yeah, in a home, and we see that a lot, right? Bed bug feces. Now, does that mean there's an active bed bug infestation? It means there was one. Doesn't mean necessarily that there still is, right? And bed bugs are very clandestine. They can go dormant for a long period of time. If we leave, they can go up to 6 months dormant where they don't eat. But if we're there, they have to eat every 7 days, and they'll feed on. We're the food, right? We're the McDonald's, right? So when it comes to bed bugs, they could be inside the walls and you don't know, right? Now, if you're doing inspections, you guys, don't worry about it. Unless you take a nap on the carpet, you're okay, right? You won't take them home with you, right? So it's not like that, right? They have to have it where it's quiet. They get inside and sit away, okay?
Yeah, Joe, I had an occasion where
Mhm.
where a state attorney had a property, I guess had been vacant for some amount of time and so on and so forth. And however they came to this conclusion, I don't know, but basically they were saying this place is infested and so on and so forth. And, you know, what can they do about it? Well, the risk was, you know, if there's that many critters there and they do something to kill them, they may die in the wall cavities and so on and so forth. I'm guessing, so would vacant homes like this be more of a target?
Are we talking about mice? Or
Yeah,
bed bugs or mice?
I think mostly rodents.
Mostly rodents.
Yeah.
The thing is when it comes to a mammal, they have to have a food source. And if a house is vacant, now a mouse can also eat something called camelback crickets. You ever seen those big ugly crickets with the high legs? They're like walking cashews for them. Okay, they love to eat those, so they can sustain their population for a while with those, and pretty good time actually, right? But if the house is vacant, they don't have a food source, and if they don't have a food source, the mouse will move on. It doesn't want to be there. So I've had people tell me, "Oh, I know that house is rat and mouse infested. It's been vacant for 6 years." Well, that tells me that there's probably not a mouse infestation in there, or even a mouse presence, because there's no food. They got nothing to eat. So other than sitting around in the living room and playing gin rummy, there's nothing else for them to do. So they'll leave and go somewhere else. right? Now, as far as insects go, bed bugs can go 6 months dormant, right? But if there's water and moisture and there's a viable insect population in the walls of whatever, the insects can perpetuate themselves because for them, that's just another environment. They don't know you're there or not. They're just perpetuating themselves, including ants or anything else, as long as there's a food source and in many cases, a water source. Right. Yep.
As a pest control contractor, are you allowed to euthanize like raccoons in Virginia?
Yeah, I have to take them to Cameron Station and by county regulation, and they can euthanize them. But there's a place in Alexandria, I just took one down today. There's a place in Alexandria where I can take a raccoon to and they'll replace them back out into the wilderness. They take care of them. Yeah, the state pays for part of it, but donations pay for the rest. They got like 30 raccoons down there, possums and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty cool to me, right? I take a bag of marshmallows with me. They love marshmallows.
The Arlington County Pest Control told me I could pay to have a pest control contractor euthanize the raccoon, but if I moved it, they could fine me $5,000 because you can't relocate them in the state of Virginia.
Well, you're not allowed to transport wildlife without a license, right? So I guess they're kind of quasi sort of around corners, right? But as far as euthanizing the animal, you can take it down to Cameron Station and they'll weigh it and delouse it, deflea it. I don't know why they do that. And then they euthanate it. And usually it costs about $180 to do that by the county, right down. And that's down there by Cameron Station down by Alexandria. And then pest control companies or wildlife companies will charge you like $500 to $1,000 for it, right? But in most cases, right, with the raccoon, if you get the eviction and you put the eviction into your attic, they'll leave. And then there's no problem. Then you don't have to worry about euthanizing or anything. In this case today with the Homeland Security, the young raccoon got in there and there was nowhere to put eviction. I can't put eviction in Homeland Security. You got all these guys in there with headphones on looking at screens. I'm not even supposed to know what the hell they're doing. So anyway, and we just picked the raccoon up, right? Literally with gloves, put it in a cage, and I took it down to the rehab people and I give it to them. They don't cost anything. And they take donations, and I routinely give them donations, right? And a lot of companies do, right? Give them donations.
What about groundhogs? Can you just shoot them?
Well, firing a weapon in Fairfax County, okay, is a difficult situation. I wouldn't recommend it, right? I don't know the laws on your own private property as far as that goes. I guess it would depend on how wealthy you are, but can you shoot a groundhog like say in Prince William County and everything? Yes, right? If it's your own property, right? But in the same breath, you can take and catch the groundhog. They're easy to catch, right?
What keeps them away?
Yeah. Well, here's the
keeps them
thing.
away?
What keeps them away? Here's an easy thing to do to keep away a groundhog. They don't like the smell of eucalyptus. If you take a tennis ball and put Vicks Vapor Rub on it and drop it down their hole, they'll leave and go to your neighbor. Okay, right. That's just a little trick of the trade there, we know, right? Same thing with a skunk. They don't like it either. But you got to be careful with it too. Don't put too much Vicks Vapor Rub on it. Like a skunk tried to pick it up and then got it all in his mouth and he was running around up and down the street spraying everything. So, right. So be careful with that. Okay. You might want to not put it on a tennis ball. You might want to put it on a rag or something where they can't take it and run off with it or something.
What about a groundhog hole against a foundation? Are they doing any damage?
Moisture is the big problem there. When they're digging anything out, whenever you dig out around a foundation, chipmunks can do that. They'll dig out around a foundation and they cause the ground to become hollowed, right? And then what ends up happening is moisture gets down inside there. And a lot of times chipmunks, when it floods, leave and they go to the next one. Groundhog, same thing. Groundhogs make a trap like a rat does and everything else, that water will stay there and it won't go into their burrow hole. They go in here, make a trap, and then they go up higher and do it. So they'll go down and then up here. So that way you can't really flood, because it rains and they don't want to get flooded out. So with a groundhog up on the foundation doing that, they'll dig into big time. One of the best days for, if you know a guy that's got a big dog, bring a big dog around and watch a groundhog leave quickly. They are afraid of dogs. They do not like dogs, right? So, and groundhogs are powerful animals. Don't mess with them. Don't think you can reach up and grab one. They will let you know, and they can do some serious damage in your hands. And yes, they are rodents. Yeah.
You mentioned how for bed bugs, we don't have to worry about it getting on our clothes to bring it back home.
Correct.
Unless you're staying in there too long, kind of scenario.
Mhm.
Is there any kind of pests or bugs and things that we should be cognizant of to not bring back out of the house with us?
Oh, that's a good point. The thing is, I've seen a home inspector do this. He went ahead and put his bag down in the kitchen and had all of his tools inside. And he went around and then he came back, took his bag and went back to his house and he brought German cockroaches with him. Okay. And the cockroaches got into his kitchen and he knew the place had cockroaches, but he didn't realize they would get into his bag. And they did. So he had German cockroaches. And of course he called me and I helped him out, right? Because we do a lot of stuff, right? But so that happens. Yeah. So be careful putting your bag down wherever you put it. Now, if you put your bag down and there's bed bugs in there, they can go in your bag too. Bed bugs will move to an area where they can smell you and it's not moving. And then when it starts moving, they do this like, oh my God, it's moving, right? And then when it stops moving, they go, oh my God, let's get out of here. And they get out of there and then they're in your home. And then you got bed bugs. So be careful where you put your bag down or your jacket, right? If it's sitting there. Anybody else got any question on that?
I just had a question about these panhead worms. Is that a real thing?
Yes,
Are they
there's
around
the hammerhead
this
worms.
area? Yeah.
Let me change this screen off. Nobody got any more questions about this, right?
No, but we're right
Right.
on top of the hour.
That's why I want to do that screen. We're on top of the hour. Okay. Yes, hammerhead worms are a real thing. If you find one, kill it or put it in a plastic baggie and kill it and then put it in the trash. Department of Agriculture doesn't want you to report them anymore. They know they're here, right? Don't ever pick it up with your hand. You pick it up with your hand, they're going to give you bad burns on your hand. And you're going to be in a bad shape.
Don't cut it into pieces.
They came from Asia. They came over from some products and they're a type of worm. They are in the Esquirlet family, right? And from the breathing nematodic. And they have this little T-shaped head and it's a worm. And when they get in there, they do what worms do kind of thing, right? And birds learn the hard way that when they pick them up, some birds can eat them, right? Crows can eat them, right? They don't care. For them, it's like hot sauce, right? Crows will eat anything. It's like hot sauce. All right.